Howdy folks, welcome back to Mingles with Jingles, episode, what is this, 18? Holy shit, I've been doing this for a while now. Well, yeah, Mingles with Jingles. What's been going on? Well, I have had the most shitty weekend imaginable. I mean, well, you know, the shittier than the shitty. Nobody's been shooting at me, I'm not starving to death. By my pampered Western standards, it's been a pretty shitty weekend. I spoke a little bit about, well, it all pretty much started on Friday. I'd been invited along to the Defence Capability Centre at Shrivenham, which is the home of the UK Military Staff College. And it was all part of a design a tank contest that Wargaming were doing on their EU forums. A chap called Ed Francis had organised the whole thing. Ed's the guy who is directly responsible for the whole Jingles Visiting Museums videos. He's the guy who notified me about the Solent Sky Aviation Museum, the very first museum visit video I did. And he managed to swing it for me to get invited along with Wargaming to go to Shrivenham and play on some tanks. So that was going to be fantastic. Of course, didn't get there. 30 minutes away from Shrivenham, major accident on the M4 motorway, shut the entire motorway down for 2 hours. Totally missed everything. Had to turn around and drive all the way back home. So I got home in a thoroughly bad mood. Needed to upload a video for the day. I had a look through my video archives and thought, okay, didn't have a lot of time. I haven't been stuck on a motorway the entire day. Found a video file, stuck an intro on it, uploaded it, first 30 comments, Jingles, what the fuck? This is a re-upload, man. We've seen this video before. This is not a new Jingles video. What's going on, dude? Oh no, right, down, get the video down, and then spend hours doing another one, and so Friday was just a disaster. Saturday wasn't much better. I spent time on Saturday doing a War Thunder video collaboration with Bismarck, who's a War Thunder YouTuber. He's a much, much better PC pilot than I am. That's not saying a lot. Most people are much better PC pilots than I am. But it was we had a really, really good hour. I had some good conversation with him. He took me by the hand and guided me through a historical battle. You know, metaphorically speaking, he didn't actually hold my hand. And then I forced him to play an arcade game. And it was hilarious. Listening to him just outraged at how the aircraft handled it. In arcade, it was like flying UFOs. It was like they were powered by magic. And it was going to be a really, really good video. Of course, it ended up being completely unusable. The audio was just unintelligible, so that was a massive waste of time. You can still see it and hear it, complete with all of the chat while we were playing on Bismarck's own channel. I will notify you when he puts it up. I highly recommend you go along and watch it because it's hilarious. One place you won't be seeing it, however, is right here on my own channel. It was just, you couldn't hear a word anybody was saying. It was a massive, massive disappointment. In fact, I couldn't even salvage the replay files from it because the very next day, Gaijin issued a mini patch for War Thunder for the whole Battle of Britain thing that's going on, which meant that all the old replays got wiped. So that was a colossal ball ache. Sunday arrives and, Combat South. I'm going to go airsofting, get some good footage, work my aggression and disappointment out on the enemy team, shoot some fools, all that good stuff. Also, I thought. First, I overslept, so I turned up at Combat South late. Secondly, my brand new AK-47, actually, my brand new AK-74, the battery wouldn't fit. I had the wrong battery for it, so that wrote that off for the day. But I thought, you know what, I've got the sniper rifle and the ghillie suit, so I can at least get some footage of, playing with that. Won't be terribly exciting, watching me lie in a bush for an hour waiting for a target to come into my sights, but, I can at least do that. So I got the sniper rifle, sights zeroed up, and then I went to get into the ghillie suit. Eddie, my faithful camera minion, picked up the camera, switched it on. Why does it say insert memory card? Oh, you've got to be joking. Memory card was still sitting in the data port in the front of my PC back home, so it couldn't film anything. Well, okay, not a complete bummer. I can at least brand new pistol, a Colt 1911 limited edition MEU from SOCOM Gear. I can at least set the hop up on that. It didn't bring any gas. Alright, I can take a hint. Well, the sniper rifle hasn't finished being upgraded. The spring had been upgraded, so it was shooting at 400 feet per second, but the bushings and cylinder head hadn't been reinforced to cope with the increased stress, so I just had to hand it in to the Combat South staff for them to take it back to the workshop, and oh, they've already gone back to the workshop. Shit. So the whole weekend was just an utter disaster. So that's what I've been getting up to. How's your day been? Oh, and before I forget, I lost a bag as well, which wouldn't have been too bad, but it was a £90 511 tactical bag, and inside the bag was my GoPro 2 camera. So there's another £230 gone down the tubes, and also in the bag was a 32GB memory card, so there's another £40 gone down the tubes, and also in the bag was the cantilever rail mount for the GoPro, specially imported from America, so there's another £30 gone down the tubes. I've just been hemorrhaging money. So yeah, the weekend was pretty much a disaster from start to finish, but there was one silver lining. I got a phone call from Ed Francis, the guy who organised the whole visit to Shrivenham in the first place, saying that, yeah, we heard you were stuck on the motorway all day. Real bummer. Sorry you missed out. It was fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Ed. And saying that basically because I'd missed it, the major at Shrivenham, who was hosting the whole event, was quite happy for me to come back and basically have the place to myself. So that's going to be amazing. They really don't care. There are certain things that they don't want people photographing or filming, but the majority of the vehicles and the tanks, which are mostly in running order, he is quite happy for me to film from the outside and the inside. As long as they don't press the engine start button, they don't mind what we do in there. Swing the turrets around, raise and elevate, raise and lower the guns. So that's going to be fantastic. I'm going back up there in a week or two with Ed, and we're going to get some film of Leopards, Challenger 2s, T-34s, T-54s, all that good stuff. So that's going to be fantastic. So, at least the weekend wasn't a total waste. Oh, and for those of you who keep badgering me in the comments of the airsoft videos to Jingles get a GoPro, which must be 40% of all the comments to every single airsoft video I've put up, even the Vietnam reenactment ones, which weren't famous for the use of helmet cams, but fair enough. Yes, I have bought another GoPro camera. It's a Hero 3 this time. I'm just waiting on the micro SD card to turn up for it, so I will start to be doing airsoft videos with helmet cam, gun cam, all that good stuff. There will be a few more airsoft videos coming up where I'm not using the camera because I lost it. But as soon as the camera's fully up and running, you'll be getting some of that stuff that you're demanding. I'm also going to start doing a new series of airsoft videos. I do apologise for those of you who aren't interested in airsoft, but I figured I've got such a massive arsenal of airsoft weapons and gear that I should probably start reviewing them, and doing things like newcomers guides, what sort of things you should be looking to get yourself if you're thinking of getting into airsoft, and doing reviews of the various different weapons and equipment that I own. We're going to start off with a review of the classic Army AK-47 SU, folding stock carbine version of the world famous AK-47. That's going to be going up in a couple of days. I did also promise you a look at some of the games that I got during the Steam Summer Sale. I haven't forgotten. There's just been so much other stuff to do. Tiny Tina's assault on Dragon Keep, the Borderlands series, which is bloody hilarious and which seems to be very popular with you guys as well. I will finish doing the walkthrough of that as well. By the way, I am totally blaming all of this weekend's misadventures on Eddie. None of it was his fault, of course, but, I'm blaming him anyway. In fact, Eddie, if you're listening to this, you're fired. Actually, no, you're not fired. Let me know when you finish going through the replay contest submissions, then you're fired. What you all looking at me like that for? I'm an evil genius. It says so right in the channel description. I don't know. Can't get the staff these days. Right, well, I suppose it must be question time. First question comes from Kyle Minton. Well, it's not really a question, it's more of a demand, really. Kyle says, Jingles, you need to use more foul language. I find it very entertaining. Fuck you, Kyle. You're welcome. Yeah, never say I don't give the people what they want. Next up is well, it's not really a question, it's a comment from Jump Seeker. And he made a comment in the previous Mingles with Jingles, which I think is very, very good. And I'd like to repeat it here and address what he said. What he said was basically this. He was talking about World of Tanks, and he said, I like this game very much, but I feel these games can have a great influence on what people know about history and mislead them with altered facts. And you know what? I started thinking about that, and he's absolutely right, of course. And it raises the whole question. I mean, anybody who's browsed any video channel on YouTube or any discussion forum or, you know, whatever on the internet will be all too aware that there are lots of people out there who, not to put too fine a point on it, talk through their arse on subjects which they claim to know a lot about. I mean, just look at the comments on the last Mingles with Jingles, and some of the people making the most outrageous claims about history, and you can't help but just wonder, are these guys serious, or are they just very, very good trolls? And if they are serious, where the hell are they getting their facts from? Just to keep things slightly in context for the moment, look at World of Tanks, for example. Look at a tank like the IS-3, which every man and their dog will tell you is one of the best tanks in the game and was a fantastic tank in real life. Actually, it wasn't. Everybody assumed it was a fantastic tank in real life. Western military planners shit themselves when they saw this thing appear in the May Day parade right after the Second World War. It was perceived to be some kind of just awesome Russian super tank, and the West didn't think they had a thing that could defeat it, and it sent Western designers, tank designers in particular, into an absolute panic, and was directly responsible for the design and introduction of tanks like the M103 and the Conqueror. In actual fact, the IS-3 wasn't that good. I mean, Soviet tanks in general had very, very uncomfortably small interior spaces. It had a very low turret, which limited the maximum depression of the main gun. The gun breech had very little room inside the turret to pivot on a vertical axis, so it couldn't really take advantage of hold-down positions the way Western tanks could. Not only that, it wasn't very well made. It had lots of mechanical problems, and the weld line on the hull had a tendency to crack open if it was smacked with high explosive shells. But of course, Western engineers could only go on pictures and film of IS-3s on parade. The Russians weren't allowing them to actually inspect the things. So everybody just assumed that this was this massive monster tank that was going to roll all over Western Europe, given half a chance, and the West had nothing that could stop it. I mean, the IS-3 wasn't a bad tank, but it wasn't the super tank that everybody imagined it to be. And again, just to keep things into context, the IS-3 in World of Tanks is a very, very good, capable tank. But you can make the same case about the Tiger. The Tiger was notoriously mechanically unreliable. But World of Tanks doesn't model mechanical unreliability. It doesn't model bad manufacturing processes, things like that. It doesn't even claim to be a 100% historically accurate tank simulator. It's not. It's an arcade tank game. And a lot of people are going around getting their opinions of Second World War history in general, and tanks in particular, from playing a game. World of Tanks isn't a historical document. It doesn't claim to be. Knowing a lot about tanks in World of Tanks does not make you a tank expert. It makes you a World of Tanks expert, and there's a big difference between the two. And it's not just games. Those of you who watched my D-Day museum visit video will have been appalled to hear there was a bunch of Normandy veterans present at the museum that day, and they were talking about their experiences on D-Day and after D-Day. And one of the visitors, I recorded it on camera, one of the visitors actually had the balls to say that he wasn't aware there were any British troops actually involved in D-Day. And not just the British, Canadians, French, Poles, South Africans, Australians, New Zealanders, you name it. Basically, what he was saying was, he thought D-Day was an American invasion of Western Europe. Now, I'll guarantee you that this guy is not the only person who thought that. There will be hundreds of thousands of people out there who believe that to be the case. Whose fault is that? Well, as is usually the case in this sort of thing, everybody likes to point their finger at the media, TV and movies. And Saving Private Ryan is usually the example that gets trotted out whenever this sort of thing gets brought up. Because Saving Private Ryan only showed Americans on D-Day. But well, that's all Saving Private Ryan was about. It was the story of one squad of US Army Rangers trying to find one US Army paratrooper. Is it any surprise that there were no British or French or Canadians or Indians or South Africans or whatever? It wasn't telling the story of the entire invasion. It was focusing on one squad of US Army Rangers. So the problem is not with movies like Saving Private Ryan. It's with people who treat movies like Saving Private Ryan as their source of historical information. It's with people who treat games like World of Tanks as their be-all and end-all one-stop shop for information on Second World War and post-war tanks, things like that. If games like World of Tanks stimulate your interest in tanks, that's a good thing. If games like War Thunder stimulate your interest in historical aircraft, that's a good thing. If movies like Saving Private Ryan stimulate your interest in the Second World War in general, or the Normandy D-Day landings in particular, that's a good thing. But they should be the starting point for your learning about the subject that you're interested in. They shouldn't be your sole source of information because they're entertainment, not history. In fact, even mediums that are presented as historically informative, and I'm pointing a finger square at things like the History Channel here, are often very, very, very biased. I can remember just sitting there not believing what I was seeing one day, watching the History Channel. And I can't remember the exact name of the program. It was a one-off program that they were doing, and it was something like the 10 greatest aircraft ever manufactured. And the list, I can't remember what order they went in, but there was the Boeing F-22 Raptor, the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. Well, you're seeing a pattern developing here. They all seem to be manufactured and designed by one company in particular. And right at the end, as the credits rolled, there was a little bit of text that came up on screen. And it basically was words to the effect of, this program paid for, written, produced and filmed by the Boeing Corporation. And I was shocked. I was appalled that this was actually being presented as historical information. It was on the History Channel, for God's sake. So I guess what I'm saying here is that, if you dabble in things that stimulate your interest in history, then by all means, get off your arse and learn more about it. But don't always just trust one source of information. I mean, I made the mistake myself a couple of weeks ago in Mingles with Jingles when quoting from Belton Cooper's book about American armour in the Second World War. A lot of what the guy was talking about was utter horseshit. But I just took his word for it, and ended up looking really, really silly. And people often use the excuse, well, they never taught me that in school. It's too late now. What utter bullshit. You've got the entire internet. The sum total of all human knowledge is right there at your fingertips. It's never been easier to learn about this sort of thing. There really is no excuse for not being better informed. Just be careful what you believe. That's all I'm saying. Don't just take World of Tanks as your source of all knowledge on tanks. Don't take World War Thunder as your source of all knowledge on aircraft. By all means, use those as starting points to stimulate your interest in the subject, but there's all sorts of sources of information out there, and not all of them agree with each other, so you shouldn't just believe the first thing you're told, I guess is what I'm saying. It's never a bad idea to question your sources of information, particularly, we're quite spoiled in Western cultures because it's impossible to keep a secret in the West. There are just too many people. There's a free press. There's just too many people digging around and asking questions that it's very, very hard to keep stuff secret and suppressed for any length of time. Governments have fallen when they've tried to do it. If, on the other hand, you come from a culture that has historically been, how can we put this, under a dictatorship for a significant part of its history, be particularly careful about questioning your sources of information, because when the state controls where all the information comes from, the state can basically say what it likes about history, and that's exactly what they tend to do. So, if you come from a country that has that kind of background, I'm just going to say be particularly careful about what you believe or what you've been taught. You've got access to the internet? Dig around. Do some learning. Don't just believe everything you're told. But it's important that even here in the West, we don't get too complacent about believing what we're told. We got involved in the Second Gulf War because we just trusted our leaders when they all said Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Nobody thought to say, do they really? Where's the proof? And I realise I'm opening a massive can of worms here by saying this, and there's probably going to be another massive argument in the comments of this video about it, but hey, what the hell. If our governments had just been honest with us and said, yeah, we're going in to remove Saddam Hussein because he's a mass-murdering fuckhead, I would have been fine with that. It was just the fact that we were lied to about the reasons for going in that really pissed me off in particular. Anyway, question time again. This one's from the always reliable Billy Warren. He wants to know, if I could add another nation to War Thunder or World of Tanks, what would it be and why? That's a good question, actually, Billy. I've had to have a good think about that. Well, obviously it was going to have to be a nation that actually had a tank or aircraft design industry, and most of them are already in the games. Now you've got countries like Czechoslovakia, for example, that had a fantastic armaments industry, both manufacturing and designing loads and loads of very famous weapons. The problem was that Czechoslovakia tended to not make them for themselves. They sold them all to the rest of the world, and so particularly if you look in World of Tanks, a lot of the pre-war and early war German tanks weren't German tanks at all. They were all Czechoslovakian designs. Even the famous British Bren gun was a Czechoslovakian design. So yeah, it's that sort of thing makes it very, very hard to pick and choose a nation, because you could say, yeah, Czechoslovakia, they designed a load of tanks. Yeah, most of them are already in the game, and we call them Germans. And then, of course, you've got the problem of countries that did build lots and lots and lots of tanks, but the tanks that they built were licensed versions of American or Soviet designs. And they tend to largely be restricted to post-war designs in the first place, which is no good for, the early tiers in games like World of Tanks. And we're talking here about stuff like, the Chinese are probably the best example. A lot of the Chinese tanks in World of Tanks are pretty much just Russian tanks that are already in World of Tanks with a different paint job and slightly changed statistics. Israeli machines, again, you could make a case for the Israelis. There's the Merkava, or I don't know how you pronounce it. It's the translation from Hebrew is the chariot, great tank, but most of the Israeli stuff is just American stuff, just modified. They did very, very good Shermans with upgunned Shermans that they used all the way through the 60s, and Patterns were improved versions of the American ones, specifically adapted to Israeli needs. But again, you're kind of stuck. If you were to put the Israeli designs into the game, you would only have tanks from tier maybe 5, 6 and up. There would be nothing at tier 1, 2, 3 and 4. And they'd just have to start making shit up again. But wargaming aren't adverse to making shit up. They've proven it time and time again. Just look at almost every Russian self-propelled gun in the game. None of them existed. Because the Russians didn't have self-propelled guns. They had lots and lots of artillery, but very few of them were self-propelled. Well, that's not strictly true. The Russians did have self-propelled guns, but they're in the tank destroyer line. Things like the Su-76 were used as self-propelled guns. The Su-152 was used as a self-propelled gun, but they're in the game as tank destroyers. So they're very difficult to actually zero in on any one nation that you could put into World of Tanks World of Tanks in particular is difficult. There's the Japanese. We're probably going to get the Japanese. I think they're putting a Japanese premium in. But, well, the Japanese didn't really have heavy tanks. They had some good light tanks. And again, I'm struggling for information here, because when you think of Japanese army in the Second World War, it was their infantry and their air force and their navy that comes to mind. Most people couldn't name a Japanese tank if they tried. I mean, I'm one of them, despite being a bit of a tank buff and an enthusiast on tank history. I couldn't name you a single Second World War Japanese tank. I certainly know what some of them looked like from watching TV shows like The Pacific. When you see a couple of Japanese tanks attacking the Marines on the airfield at Peleliui, but I couldn't tell you what it was called. So I'm going to hand this one over to you guys, the subscribers. Argue it out in the comments. What would you have if you decided you were if you were given the opportunity of deciding what the next national line was going to be introduced into War Thunder or World of Tanks? What nation would you pick, and why would you choose them? Well, we're going to round things off this week with a couple of Navy stories, because they're always popular, and people are always asking in the comments, Jingles, what's the best thing you ever got away with when you were in the Navy, and what's the best thing you didn't get away with when you were in the Navy? And there's a whole bunch of things I could tell you about, but I'm going to choose two subjects in particular. The first was when I was a radio operator on HMS, I think it was either Southampton or Nottingham. We were alongside in a foreign port. I think it was actually Haifa in Israel. And as duty radio operator, or one of the two duty radio operators, it was our responsibility to ensure that the radio office, the main communications office, was locked at the end of the working day. I forgot to lock the office on the way out. I think we must have finished work at about 9:30 at night. And then we did make sure that we locked all the safes with all the cryptographic equipment and codes, keys and all that good sort of stuff. We made sure that we did that. And then I took the keys, shut the door, didn't lock it, returned the keys to HQ1. So midnight, I get summoned back to the communications office to find the door wide open, with the officer of the day going around checking that all the safes were still shut, with the duty weapon engineering department roundsman standing there with a whole bunch of keys in his hand with him. And straight away I realised what it was I'd done, or hadn't done. But I totally got away with it, because what had happened, or what was supposed to happen, was that the communications office is a weapon engineering compartment, and as well as the duty radio operator, there's also a duty WE department roundsman. Well, by a massive stroke of luck, the duty WE roundsman that day was a lazy turd. And instead of actually doing his proper rounds, checking all these compartments that there was nothing wrong with them and they were all secured and the equipment working in them was still fine, instead of actually doing his job, all he'd done was every hour on the hour, he went around and he signed the chit on the front of the doors to say, yep, 9 o'clock at night, rounds complete, compartment secure. 10 o'clock, compartment secure. 11 o'clock, compartment secure. He never actually even tried the door handles. He was just going around signing to say that he'd done it without actually doing it. Officer of the day wanted to know what time I left the office. Said, yeah, 9:30. And did you lock the door? Of course I did, sir. Couldn't prove otherwise, because right there on the front of the door were 3 signatures from the WE roundsman saying he'd checked those compartments and there was nothing wrong with them. And he knew I was the one who'd left the door open. But what was he going to do? Was he going to say, oh, you must have been the one who left the door open because I didn't do my rounds properly? He couldn't possibly admit it. So, totally got away with that one. One of the ones I didn't get away with, of which there were many, was at Fort Blockhouse, which was a joint service medical establishment. So Army, Navy, Air Force, medics, doctors, nurses, you name it, they were all there. And one day I was walking past accident and emergency. It was a bright sunny day, but there was an overhang over the access doors to accident and emergency where the ambulances would pull up. So it was sheltered from the rain. But what it meant was that you walk in from bright sunlight and then suddenly you're in shadow. And, it takes a while for your eyes to adjust. So as I'm walking under this overhang, and suddenly it all gone very, very dark, there's somebody walking towards me and walking past me, and I had no idea who it was. All I could see was this black silhouette. Turns out it was an army major, and I walked right past him without saluting him. Well, he took offence at this, and once he got past me, he stopped and he turned around and he said, "Don't you salute majors in the Navy?" "No, sir, we don't have any majors in the Navy," I said to him. Yeah, it turns out army majors don't have much of a sense of humour. I didn't have a lot to say after that, other than lots of yes sir, no sir, and sorry sir. I mean, I thought it was funny, but yeah, he really didn't. That's it for this week, folks. Sorry about this late, re-uploaded version of Mingles with Jingles, but I did manage to recover most of the files that I used and get it up even if it was a day late. And as an added bonus, you get me to kill some artillery. Look at that little scumbag scurrying for the water to suicide in at the end of the game. Yeah, not this time, sunshine. As always, folks, take care. I'll catch you next time.